In this video, I want to talk about using some specific textures in the Arnold AI standard shader, specifically for the color, bump, and specular roughness. Let's take a look. So I've created just simple scene here with a sphere, rendered it out already using the Arnold render view, and I've opened up the hypershade so we can see the base material that I have on there. It's just the default AI standard material, and I've just called it Practice Matte. Otherwise, I haven't touched it at all. You can see that by default, it's a fairly shiny surface, and we're able to see some of the reflection that I have in my environment here. I already have lighting and stuff like that. That's not the focus of this video, so we will just focus on the texture. So let's start out first with the base color. And just so we can see exactly what's going on here, I'm going to take my specularity. I'm going to put it back down to 0 here so that we don't have anything. We're just going to be dealing with the color base. So when we want to put a texture on, we want to go over here and grab this guy right here. We can also do it in the hypershade, but for the ease of use, we'll do it with this little checkbox here. So we'll click on this, and that brings this guy up. We'll go ahead and choose File. You can see immediately that that is changing the update to the render. It's also brought in a little file node and a UV place 2D texture node here. And this is what is using the UVs on this. If we wanted to, to repeat something multiple times across the same tiles and that kind of stuff, we would do that. I'm not going to get into that too much, just using the default UVs of this sphere. But we do want to spend some time in this area right here, in this file, which opens up right here. So first thing we want to do is grab an image. So we'll go over and I will grab one of my images here. So notice that I am working in a project folder. And in my source images folder, I've just separated them out so that a little bit more easy to find. So I'm going to go into the diffuse color, and we'll start with something very, very simple here. We'll go with like this beach ball here and open that up. And you can see there, it creates that, shows up the color, and that's really what we want to do. We want to make sure that we leave our color space at sRGB. We want to make sure it matches that. So we're leaving that, if it's a colored object, an sRGB. I have in the past talked about using the Scene Linear Rec 709/sRGB. This is for a different type of workflow. And for this class, we'll just go ahead and stick with the sRGB. Right, everything else we're gonna leave the way it is, just taking a look at that nice diffuse map. Let's throw in a different one just for being able to check things out here. Let's check out the, let's try this brick here. We can open that. You can see again, looks like we have some nice brick. And we'll swap it out one last time here. And we'll bring in this rocks seamless texture. You can see there we've got that rock seamless texture. So that, just different ways. The color is probably the easiest way to texture an object, but it should not be the only way. We can get some very, very good starts with color, but we want to think about the bump. We want to think about the reflectivity, the specular roughness. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab these two nodes here, right like that, and I'm just going to hit delete on my keyboard, and let's go back into this texture. You'll see that my color has become black. I'm going to bring that to about a mid-gray or so, somewhere right like that, and we're going to start to look at the bump map. Right? Now what the bump map does is it creates sort of an optical illusion that there are little surface textures to it. And these are things that are too small or too fine that we would not want to model. If we weren't going to model these, it would make our object way, way too high poly, and it would just take forever to render. So it's a nice way to sort of throw a little bit of extra texture on things without having to model them. Now, bump maps are located under the Geometry tab. here, under this right here. Okay, so we'll click that. And we can see that we have bump map right in there. We're going to click on this little checker right there. And again, we'll choose file. Now, unlike the last time, we didn't pop straight into our file. Let's go ahead and turn this off for a second, just so it doesn't keep rendering when I'm not really doing anything. Let's take a look here at what we have. We'll just zoom in onto this a little bit. What has actually happened is this is that file that we just loaded. But Maya knows that we're putting something into the bump slot, right? Into that bump slot, which is right in here, which we'll grab here. See, right there, it knows that we're doing that. We just need to, it needs to say, hey, what kind of bump map this is. And there's several different kinds here. We're going to just stick with the plain old bump map. Our bump map's going to be a grayscale. So we're going to click over here, and let's go ahead and put in another map here. So instead of our diffuse color, let's go back up a level here to our bump, and let's use this little text bump that I have, that I've just sort of created a bunch of text across like that, and we'll just hit open. Now, like I said, bump maps are typically black and white, all right? And we want to make sure it reads that super well. So there's a couple of things that we need to change. Whereas for a colored image, we want to leave it at sRGB. For this, we want to switch it over to raw, all right? We want to switch that over to raw, and that's going to be true for any black and white image. And then in this case, we also want to make sure that this alpha is luminance is checked. Now, this is located under the color balance, and we can open that up and just make sure that that's on. So we want to make sure that alpha is luminance, and that's what we're going to use for this bump. So now that we've got a bump map in here, let's go ahead and reactivate our render here. We can see, look at that. We have our little bump. Now let me bring up this image and show you again just what it looks like. All right, so this is what the image looks like. So we can see, let's bring it over here, that the sort of mid-gray here is not doing anything. It just, that doesn't go up, it doesn't go down. But we have this light color and then this dark color. And you can see that the light color looks like it's slightly raised, and then the darker color looks like it is depressed into the object. So I'll just close this. And this to me feels like we're getting a little bit of artifacts, especially on this guy right here. And usually what that's a sign of is that it's trying to do it too much. Remember, we're not trying to make it look like it pops out completely. We're just trying to get that sense like if we rubbed our finger over, it'd be like embossed text or something like that. So if we go back into this bump 2D, we have this bump depth that we can control. Now, if I were to really, put this super, super high, this starts to look really, really bad, and we don't want to have that at all. So really, you'll rarely put that above 2. Most of the time, you're going to end up going much, much lower. Let's try 0.5. You can see that looks a little bit better. I think we need to go much lower. Let's try 0.1. All right, and it updates it. You see, that looks much better. It feels like if I were going to rub over that with my hand, that it would give me a little bit of texture there. So that looks pretty good. We could even go maybe a little bit lower, like 0.0. Let's try 3 or something like that. You see, we're starting to lose that a little bit, but it is still there, still allowing us to get sort of that embossed type of look. All right, well, let's put this back up to 1. And let's go back over to this file, and let's just pause this for a second. And we'll go into our file here, and let's just choose a different material here, different texture. And I think this time we'll use this guy just to see how this looks. And we'll bring that in, and let's go ahead and turn that render on. You see, whoa, it's like what happened to our little light gray? This is a great example in which the bump map is sort of overwhelming the image. So we want to bring that down quite a bit. So let's bring that all the way down to, let's say, 0.1. There we are. We're getting a little bit of our color back. Let that render catch up. You see it's still fairly dark in there. So, what do we could maybe do that. That feels really, really rough to me though. So let's bring that down to say maybe 0.01 and see what we get. That's much better. We get the sense that there's this little indent in here. That's great. And then there's still a little bit of texture across here. We could maybe try, let's try like 0.03 and see what that gives us. So if we wanted it to be a little bit more, that just feels like it's a little bit too much to me. But, you know, we could probably get away with that. Let's leave it with 0.02 and see what that gives me. All right, excellent. So we've got a little bit of texture to that, and let's try another type of texture. So we'll just pause this for a second as we bring in one last bump, and we'll bring in just this rock bump here, just sort of this randomized rock. We'll open that up, and let's go ahead and start this bump depth at 1. We know we're probably not going to need it that high, but let's just see what it takes. Looks like here. So you can see, again, very, very rough. Let's bring that down. Let's do our 0.1 value here. And you see, that's much better. Getting a little shading in here and that kind of stuff. Now, if we had, you know, a color texture, right, a diffuse map that went with this, this would look super awesome. I'm not going to work on that right now, but we can drop that 0.01. And you can see we've lost some of the cool detail, but we still have some of this larger detail. All right, excellent. So let's go ahead and pause the video here, and we'll start up in the next video with the specular map.